Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Daan du Toit, and I'm an official of the South African Department of Science and Innovation, and I will be your moderator for this very important first public consultation on the mRNA Technology Transfer Hub.
There are multiple reasons why South Africa is well positioned to lead this initiative. We have existing facilities to pilot. We have an established relationship with Biovac since 2013 to establish local vaccine manufacturing capability for the provision of vaccines, and we have a strong, capable regulatory authority that will support in establishing good manufacturing practices and ensuring compliance. All the partners in the consortium bring valuable experience and expertise. Afrigen Biologics and Vaccines is a biotechnology company that focuses on product development and will provide training to Biovac, and in time will be the training hub for all the other manufacturers in the continent. Recently, South Africa has shown that we have a world-class scientists who actually were part of the team, including the team from Botswana, who detected the new Omicron variant through the genomic surveillance. The consortium will leverage the expertise of these scientists in academia to harness science, technology, and broader knowledge in order to produce research-based evidence vaccines. The current COVID-19 vaccination program is testament that collaboration across sectors is power, and it is possible to achieve better health outcomes for all South Africans. We are confident that we have the necessary experience to make this a success for the African continent. We would like to thank the Department of DSI under the leadership of Honorable Minister Nzimande and the Deputy Minister Manamela, who's here with us today, Director General Philip Dwaha, and all the capable technical experts in that department for being the leader in this and working with us and leading South Africa in general. And I thank you very much. I hope the discussions will go very well. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Director General, not only for those words, but the ongoing leadership you and your department continues to provide as South Africa confronts the pandemic, and also for your strong support for this initiative. As you've indicated, this is an initiative which has at the highest level strong support from the South African government. It was our President Ramaphosa, which announced its launch. And now, as a further sign of the strong support, it's my honor to invite South Africa's Deputy Minister for Higher Education, Science and Innovation, Mr. Buti Manamela, to address us. Honorable Deputy Minister, the floor is yours.
Thank you very much, Prof. Minister of Health, Dr. Joe Parker in absentia, Director General of Science and Innovation, Dr. Muofhe, and also Director General of the Department of Health, esteemed panelists, our local and international partners, distinguished guests, ladies and gentlemen. Firstly, I'd like to take this opportunity to extend our apology on behalf of our minister who couldn't make it here today, and therefore asked me to represent the ministry in delivering the opening remarks to this very important forum. And therefore, it is my honor and privilege to address this first consultative forum on the COVID mRNA vaccine technology transfer hub. As part of our contribution to the national and global fight against the novel coronavirus, in June this year, we announced the establishment of the World Health Organization Vaccine Technology Transfer Hub. And as a country, we're greatly honored that Cape Town has been chosen to host this hub. This is testament to the quality of South Africa's scientific expertise and infrastructure, and a vote of confidence in our country's capability for vaccine sufficiency. As you may be aware, this is both the first facility of its kind and the first to be based on the African continent. Its purpose is to increase access to mRNA vaccines in low and middle income countries, especially in Africa, thus ensuring a sustainable vaccine supply for the current and future pandemics by establishing local manufacturing capacity using a technology transfer model. As part of its function, the South African hub will involve in end-to-end development of mRNA-based vaccines. It will serve as mRNA vaccine training facility where technology is established at industrial scale and clinical development is performed. A training center will be established as part, as well as a current goods manufacturing practice clinical trial production facility to support vaccine development. Commercial manufacture of an mRNA vaccine will be key both to meeting demand and to ensuring the sustainability of the technology transfer. To this end, full use will be made of South African technical expertise in genomics, immunology, vaccine manufacturing, and clinical trials, thus feeding the pipeline for local manufacturing. Manufacturers from low and middle income countries will be able to receive training at the hub, as well as licenses to the technology used by the hub. The program will transfer sufficient know-how to enable manufacturers in these countries to successfully manufacture vaccines at scale, thereby supporting further clinical development, national and regional market authorizations with World Health Organization pre-qualification and sustainable supply to meet local and regional demand. The initial mRNA vaccine is being modeled on open source technology and will be replicated and improved on the basis of research that is ongoing among the various partners in our country. As a country, we're set to invest approximately 100 million euros in vaccine development and manufacturing over the next 5 years. It is therefore important to provide assurance that the hub will in no way be involved in misuse of intellectual property. Not only is the vaccine candidate being modeled on open source technology, but the medicines patent pool, which is responsible for the intellectual property and licensing elements of the project, will ensure that patents are not infringed upon. The hub will utilize the results of ongoing research by the national and international partners to ensure an improved vaccine that is safe and effective against both current and future strains of COVID-19. It should also be noted that mRNA vaccine technology is also promising for use against other diseases such as TB, malaria, and possibly HIV/AIDS. Hence, the facility will significantly boost South Africa's drive to build its innovation capacity and develop a pipeline of homegrown products, including mRNA-based vaccine for malaria. I also think it is important to emphasize that this facility is based on an inclusive partnership model. The partners include the World Health Organization, the Medicine Patent Pool, Afrigen Biologics, the Biovac Institute.
You know when you write it, you listen.
A network of universities and institutes coordinated by the South African Medical Research Council and the Africa Center for Disease Control and Prevention. Our long-term vision is for a multilateral technology transfer initiative aimed at improving health security in low and middle income countries through sustainable regional production of essential health biologicals. As part of today's forum, we will be hosting a panel discussion featuring an exciting lineup of speakers drawn from the scientific community, our local and international partners, and also from civil society. Through this discussion, we also hope to demonstrate South Africa's capability for vaccine sufficiency and to discuss the progress made since the establishment of the hub, since the hub was announced in June. In conclusion, we have no doubt that this facility will be of considerable benefit to our country, the continent, and middle-income countries globally, and make a significant contribution to the development of essential skills and technologies in the places where they are needed most. I wish you fruitful deliberations and look forward to the outcomes of the discussion. Thank you for listening.
Thank you very much, Deputy Minister. Thank you very much for your time, but most important, above all, for your consistent support for this very important work and for really very strategically setting the scene for the rest of our discussions. As yourself, Deputy Minister and Director General Buthelezi had highlighted, this initiative is all about partnership. It's about partnership between the Department of Science and Innovation, the Department of Health. It's about international international partnership within the framework of our relations with the World Health Organization, the partnership with the Medicines Patent Pool. It's a Pan-African partnership, as is evidenced by the involvement of the African Union Center for Disease Prevention. It is also a partnership with industry. We have with us representatives from Biovac, from Afrigen, and of course the world of science, with our university sector and the Medical Research Council all represented here. So what I've just done now is to give you an indication of what the rest of this afternoon's proceedings will be about. We will have a panel discussion where we will be discussing, interrogating with all the different partners what their contributions to this important initiative will be. But as I've said, it's all about a discussion, and it's a discussion with you. So we invite your participation through the chat box here in the webinar function, but also on social media using the hashtag Making Vaccines for Africa, where you can pose your question to the panelists. Perhaps you want to understand better how the partnership will work, or you may offer proposals, perhaps for involvement from your own institution. But to really set the scene, I'm going to invite now, for further detail on the initiative, to invite Dr. Martin Friede, who's the coordinator responsible for the technology transfer hub at the World Health Organization, to do an introductory presentation for us. South Africa continues to deeply appreciate the global leadership the World Health Organization provides, and we are indebted for the multiple partnership opportunities, not least the one on the mRNA technology transfer hub, which our colleagues at the WHO is affording us, and we are committed to reciprocate that trust. So Martin, over to you.
Thank you very much, Daan, and thank you, the Director General, Deputy Minister, and distinguished delegates. So what I would like to, just in a few minutes, is to give a high-level overview of how this came into being and what this technology transfer hub is about. I'd just like to go into a bit of background, that the COVAX Supply Chain and Manufacturing Task Force was set up, and this was really to ensure that there was a supply of COVID vaccines to the world. So there were a number of streams in this. There was to end the acute phase of the COVID pandemic by the end of 2021. That's, as you know, is in 2 weeks' time. Optimize the number of vaccine doses that are manufactured in the short term, to prioritize the doses of COVAX with a special emphasis on the supply in the countries, low middle income countries, to ensure greater equity. One of the biggest challenges we've seen with this pandemic is inequity. Rich countries got vaccines, the poor countries did not. And to mitigate the unintended impact on other vaccines and health products. As we responded to COVID, a lot of other vaccination programs, such as measles, were really being hit. And this could have resulted in massive cause of death from other diseases. But what I'm going to talk about today is this last one, to initiate regional health security through the establishment of sustainable regional long-term manufacturing of vaccines. So this is what we call the Manufacturing Task Force Workstream 3. There were 3 work streams. The first Workstream 1, this was about ensuring there was adequate supply of glass vials, rubber stoppers. Workstream 2 was about making sure that if there was a company that had excess vaccine that it couldn't fill, other companies would be able to fill it for them, sort of bilateral deals being done. And Workstream 3, which is being led by WHO with Medicines Patent Pool, this is about establishing what we call multilateral technology transfer, where it's not going from one manufacturer to one recipient, but where we establish the technology at a single site, what we call a hub. And from that hub, it is transferred to many manufacturers. In this case, manufacturers first in Africa, then Latin America, Southeast Asia, Middle East. The objective is to increase the number of companies on Earth that have access to the technology, but very especially focusing on those parts of the world where there is insufficient vaccine manufacturing capacity. Now, within this, as we built this up, we had to think about a number of issues. So we've created working groups. The first one looks at which technology. So how did we choose mRNA? And within the mRNA, which of the mRNA technologies did we choose? Because there's many ways to make mRNA. Then we've got to look at the IP and make sure that we've got the license, as has just been mentioned, that we're working in an open source and respecting IP. The second one is to make sure that when we set this up, it is following GMP perfectly, but also providing assistance to the recipients of the technology to make sure that they are applying GMP correctly. Then we have to ensure that this is aligned with regulatory agencies, that the regulatory agencies have been built up, but everything that's been done at the hub, at the spokes, because the hub transfers the technology to spokes, this hub and spoke concept. Really critical within this is the business model. We're building mRNA technology facilities to make mRNA vaccines. When COVID is over, what are they going to do? We need to ensure that this is done within an economically viable, economically sustainable system. And finally, we need to ensure funding and governance. Now, something recently has been added, and we can't say a lot about it for the next few weeks, but we have recognized that the lack of a skilled workforce in biomanufacturing is one of the biggest challenges to doing technology transfer into low and middle income countries. So we will be announcing a biomanufacturing workforce training center, and this will hopefully address some of the challenges of doing tech transfer into low and middle income countries. Now, this already has been announced. The South African consortium was set up to build the technology transfer hub and to work with spokes. So this hub is it's Afrigen, which is really the hub. Biovac is the first spoke, but it was necessary that the hub had a manufacturing facility with it. And really critical to identifying South Africa as this global mRNA hub was the tremendous strength of the South African universities, here represented by the South African Medical Research Council. And then we've got local and regional partners. So the local partner, we're working, this is being done in close collaboration with the Department of Science and Innovation, but also with the African CDC. And this is important because there's 54 countries in Africa. It would not make sense if 54 countries each built an mRNA facility. We need regional guidance on where these facilities should be put. And this is being done with the global partners of WHO and Medicines Patent Pool. Now, quick overview of the project status and summary of communications to date. We announced the initial call for expression of interest in April 16th. It already feels like years ago, but that's only 8 months ago. In June the 21st, South African President Ramaphosa with French President and WHO's DG announced that South Africa had been nominated and establishing this in South Africa. By July, we established the vaccine manufacturing working group with our partners in South Africa and had letters of agreement between all of us. By September, our colleagues in Latin America had already announced 2 countries that would be the first spokes from Latin America beyond Biovac. And very recently, we announced a call for expression of interest from other countries on Earth that are not Latin America. And we currently have about 40 countries that have expressed interest to receive the technology. So the bad news for Afrigen is there's going to be a lot of training that you're going to have to do. This is what it's going to look like. There we've got the first hub in South Africa with the first spoke. We're already 2 spokes identified in Latin America. By the end of this year, we'll have nominated other spokes in other parts of the world. And early next year, we will be identifying another hub for another technology, potentially viral vectors. And then there will be spokes to receive that technology. Oh, this is done with, we have to have some governance about this. So the decisions here are being made by the WHO Director General, and he's informed by the WHO Secretariat. And this Secretariat is informed then by a number of other groups. So we have an advisory committee called PDVAC, the Product Development for Vaccines Advisory Committee, that is providing assessment of all of the proposals, and that provides it to the WHO Secretariat. And this Secretariat informs Director General, but also works with steering committees that are dedicated to each hub. So there is a specific steering committee to the South African mRNA hub There will be a steering committee for other hubs, and there will be a steering committee for the biomanufacturing training facility, which is linked to the WHO Academy. So this is fairly complex, but it means that we are dealing with public funds, so this has to be done in a transparent manner. Very quick, there's a detailed Gantt chart here. It's too complex to read, but I guess the key issues here are that the selection and the prioritization of who is going to receive the technology, that's going to be done over the next several weeks. And Afrigen is going to begin the training of these recipients in Q1 next year. Now, Q1 is 3 months, and it might take us towards the second part of Q1 for this training to begin. And then Afrigen will be entering phase 1 clinical trials with their technology by the end of next year. And at the same time, Biovac will be trained, and Biovac will be producing material for clinical trials in 2023, with clinical trials starting in 2023. So this is the timeline, first of all, for South Africa to get its mRNA COVID vaccines onto the pipeline, and also to help other countries on Earth get their mRNA vaccines up. Critical to this will be what vaccines do we use mRNA for once we've finished with COVID. Now, here you can see the governance of the South African hub. It is Medicines Patent Pool with African CDC, with the South African Department of Science and Innovation. And we have one independent expert there, Dr. De Wild, very experienced person. And these then, we work with the WHO Secretariat and is advised by a number of committees, including WHO PDVAC and Medicines Patent Pool's EAG. Now, we can't do this without money. And essentially, we've got 3 objectives within this. Objective 1 is to establish the hub. Objective 2 is to establish the first spoke, that's Biovac. And objective 3 is the development of local innovation and products. Really important that South Africa takes the lead on this and actually tries not just to make copies of other people's vaccines, but tries to make new vaccines, vaccines made in Africa for Africa. So here you can see the budget for this. It's a budget of roughly 92 million euros for the period of about 5 years, of which 32 million is for the next 2 years. Now, this is a lot of money by some people's perspectives. It's not a lot of money when you look at how much has been spent on the pandemic. We've got a lot of international support, and a lot of donors have stepped up to the plate. The French, Canadians, the Europeans, the Germans, the German Investment Bank, the German Development Bank, ELMA, Belgium, a range of others, which you can see on the screen there. I won't read through all of them. And currently we appear to have raised about 52 million euros of the 92 million budget that we require for this. And this has been raised in a very short period of time. So we are confident that we will be able to meet the financial objectives that are required for this to be a success. And here you can see where we're likely to run into some budget shortages. This is a cash flow issue. But what I would like to say is, everything is in place for this to work. We've got some of the best scientists on Earth helping us, and the South African infrastructure is excellent. The universities are excellent. Afrigen is excellent. Biovac is excellent. So in a nutshell, I'm going to quote a famous politician, just say, yes, we can. We will succeed in this. It might take us a moment to get it done, but we will do it. Over the next several weeks, just some few announcements. So we've recently issued a call for expression of interest of people who want to receive the mRNA, and we'll be announcing this. We've recently also will be announcing the Global Manufacturing Training Hub, where this is going to be to train people of how to operate in GMP facilities. And we have an engagement with the civil society organization that update on communications. For me, my conclusion to all of you is, yes, we can. This is not going to be easy, but we will succeed. With all of you, thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Martin, and for setting the scene, really giving us a a comprehensive overview, and we'll now get into the detail by discussing with the different partners. And I'm also delighted that in the Zoom chat box, we already have a number of pertinent questions posed, and I can assure those who are posing them that we will engage with them as the afternoon proceeds. As Martin highlighted, a critical role in the partnership is being played by a proudly African startup company, the type of companies we want to grow and support to build the vibrant African knowledge economy we believe in, and that's Afrigen, Dr. Petro Terblanche. So I'm going to invite Dr. Petro Terblanche to tell us a little bit more about Afrigen's involvement in this partnership. What are the attributes, the unique value proposition which makes Afrigen such an important partner, but also what are some of the lessons we are learning as we seek really to strengthen and to develop the Africa health innovation sector. So Petro, over to you.
Daan, thank you very much, and to all our participants, it's a great pleasure to engage. I'm going to focus on what are the key aspects that made Afrigen a possibility to deliver on the promise that Martin just presented, and I'm going to focus on 5. Firstly, we operate in an enabling environment. The support from central government, local government, provincial government in South Africa is unbelievable. Total support from the top right through, creating an enabling environment. In addition to that, on the continental level, the support from the African CDC and the African Union supporting and creating that enabling environment. And then internationally, support from WHO, MPP and all our partners, both internationally contributing to an enabling environment, which is essential also for success. The second point was Afrigen's partnership models. Firstly, in the early days of our existence, our first partnership was with Biovac. Morena's on the call, who will speak later. First ever partnership was Biovac and Afrigen for a technology transfer for the production, manufacturing of a TB vaccine in clinical development, localized the manufacturing of such a vaccine for the African continent. So the partnership with Biovac goes back a long time. It's built on trust and respect, and again now is being put again to effectiveness. The second one is not many people realize, but Afrigen was in fact incubated in the South African Medical Research Council facilities. The Medical Research Council provided a home for us. In the early days, we were only 4 or 5 people, and we were incubated and grown in that environment. An incredibly powerful partnership. And the third one is our partnership with South African universities. Afrigen has, in a very resourceful manner, created partnerships with UCT, with Northwest University, with UWC, WITS, incredibly powerful. And the partnerships was around vaccine development. I'll talk a little bit about our capabilities and infrastructure, which fuel these partnerships. But in all, this is a small, young company, very much relying on the strategic partnerships and valuing partnerships. A second very important key success factor. The third one is our facilities. We have up till April 2020, renting small laboratories at the Medical Research Council, but started building our own facility in the midst of level 5 COVID lockdown. We now have R&D laboratories, analytical microbiology. We've established the first ever adjuvant formulation facility on the African continent. And that facility and capability was part of our partnerships with UCT and other organizations in the vaccine development space. We have, at the time that the WHO put out the call, we just completed our own vaccine facility, end-to-end vaccine facility suitable for production of clinical trial material, suitable for scale-up, suitable to produce end-to-end vaccines. And it was a microbial platform-based design that is suitable for mRNA vaccines. So we had a facility that was ready to be taken up and brought a permanency to a future initiative with all the partnerships. And fourthly, and mostly the most important, is our people. We're a really can-do team. We're a small team, about 26 people at the moment, scientists, engineers, technologists, technicians, pharmacists, pharmacologists, with combinedly have about more than 60 degrees amongst the teams, straddling engineering, science, technology, pharmacy, and also management. It's a team that has a culture of learning and has a culture of doing. So it's a team that really was ready for the challenge to take this on. And I also want to mention here, this is a team that has proven in the very short period, in the last 3 months, the teams, Karen and I think the team on the call here, credit to them, mobilized with Patrick Withnow's team, the WITS team, phenomenal progress. The hub was set up with a vision to have, or a plan to have a technology transfer. Martin alluded a bit to that. We did not get a technology transfer from the 2 leading mRNA vaccine manufacturers. So we had to do it ourselves. So again, a team getting together with the WITS team and mobilizing. We're developing our own processes, our own vaccines is based on a specific sequence. It has a clear target product profile, and it is relevant for what we need to do to bring a COVID-19 vaccine to clinical trials in 1 year from now. Again, proven the ability of a team that's a can-do team. And then the last one, very important. This is a company, it's a truly South African company, but it operates on good governance, clean audits, business principles, and we have shareholders, Industrial Development Corporation, which is a government-enabled entity, and Avacare Health, who were prepared to make these facilities and direct the company's focus towards public good. In addition, the culture of the company, although we're a biotech startup company, would expect us to be able to be competitive, hold on to our IP, create value from our IP. There was no problem in the culture of this company to go open source and to have an open innovation culture where what we develop here in the partnership within this hub will be for public access. So these are the key success factors and key drivers that I think will make this mRNA hub and its partners a successful venture. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Dr. Terblanche. You had alluded to in your remarks on the importance of collaboration with the scientific community, specifically our universities. And of course, African scientists, including those in universities, continue to do Africa proud to be at the forefront of the fight against COVID-19. So I would now like to invite Professor Alex Sigal, who's from the Africa Health Research Institute, located in South Africa's KwaZulu-Natal province, just to reflect on this important contribution from African scientists, specifically those in the university sector. Alex, over to you.
So thank you very much for inviting me to this very, very important meeting. So I think in the last few days, in last few weeks, things have changed quite a bit. And we were in a race to understand the Omicron variant and how to deal with it. And I think one thing that the South African science proved is that we're no worse and perhaps better than a lot of other much larger scientific programs around the world. I can show you some of our results, and this was an effort by the greater scientific community in South Africa, including top groups here in KwaZulu-Natal, at the University of KwaZulu-Natal, at WITS, at the NICD, at UCT, and other places, and really these groups, and Stellenbosch, and these groups came together and were able to push through and quickly grow, characterize, understand what is perhaps can be expected from the Omicron variant. If I can share the screen just very quickly, I'll give you the bottom line. Can anybody see?
Yes, we can see. And I suggest you stay with that in the interest of time. Yeah, we can see.
Okay, great. So what do you, first of all, one point is that we've managed to isolate, to outgrow the live virus. And we managed to report on the neutralization of the Omicron virus by the Pfizer elicited immunity. And what we found is that there's a very large drop of neutralization. But I think the news is generally pretty good. That means people who are previously infected, which is the majority of South Africans, and they were vaccinated with a vaccine such as this, actually there is a drop, but it doesn't drop to levels that we expect would make the vaccine not work, especially for severe disease. And we can make some estimates of how effective these vaccines are in Omicron. I think though the point is that we have succeeded doing this in less than 2 weeks, from identifying kind of the samples that were involved to actually doing all the virus isolation and neutralization. And I believe the South African laboratories reported on Omicron within 36 hours of identifying it. Again, being the first in the world. It's not clear where this variant actually came from, but certainly it was identified here. And I think what all this means is that South African science is at the cutting edge. And the next step to identifying these variants, and of course, will be South Africa as a hub in many ways, and variants will be coming also here from other places. And we can identify them. We can see what they do. And I think the next step, and the next very important step, is actually to know how to design a vaccine locally to these variants, because I think we can close these loops faster than anyone else. And I have to say, I'm very proud to be part of the South African research community here, which I think has shown over the last year and a half that we can do it, and that we are at the leading edge of science worldwide. Thanks.
Thank you very much, Professor Sigal. We spoke about the excellence in African science, in South African science. We are very privileged that we have with us this afternoon one of South Africa's leading scientists. She has had numerous international recognitions, and that's Dr. Glenda Gray, who's the president and CEO of South African Medical Research Council. Of course, the public-funded research organizations such as the MRC also play a critical role, not only in this initiative, but as part of the overall science and innovation response to COVID-19. So Dr. Gray, if I could perhaps just ask you to reflect, also drawing on your huge experience, the experience of the MRC. For example, South Africa has had a long history of fighting infectious disease, including vaccine development, clinical trial, notably within the context of HIV/AIDS. What are the lessons we can learn, and how do you see that also then translating into this initiative? Dr. Gray?
Thank you, Daan. So thank you. So I think it's always important to have a medical research council that's well established between the Department of Health and the Department of Science and Innovation, because we can leverage the expertise of the DSI and the expertise of the NDOH and remain relevant for health in this country and for pandemics. I also think I want to acknowledge people like Alex. South Africa has a very small community of researchers, but they're all willing and committed to working together. And so we're part of a very vibrant and collaborative research network, which is really incredible. So for those of you that don't know, the South African Medical Research Council's job is to fund and conduct research that changes the lives of South Africans. And we focus on the most common causes of mortality in South Africa. And this year, in 2021, COVID-19 will be the leading cause of death in South Africa and will surpass things like HIV and TB. So by collaborating with researchers, both within South Africa, on the African continent and internationally, we're able to leverage all the resources that we require to remain relevant in terms of vaccine development and the management of pandemics. And we work with various universities in South Africa. We also try and ensure that we pay attention to diversity and make sure that we also support the development of research in historically disadvantaged institutions and pay attention to diversity and capacity development. We work with our two sister organizations, the National Health Laboratory Service and SAPRA, to enable the government-based research entities to respond in a timely fashion. The MRC acts as a steward and a custodian and acts as a convener for the scientists in South Africa, and also acts as a source to raise both local government funding and international funding. So we're well positioned within the Department of Science and Innovation and Department of Health to really be responsive as a medical research council. For our work, we will support the project development. We will support the fundraising and co-funding of these initiatives. We also have great expertise in preclinical and clinical vaccine development, and this is where we will utilize our clinical researchers in the country and our researchers that work in preclinical drug and vaccine development, and so we'll be able to contribute in that way. We support laboratory work, as you've heard from Alex, and we basically work with the whole of South Africa to ensure that we can make an international impact. And so we have learned a lot from the HIV epidemic, and the HIV epidemic pivoted our resources to be able to respond in a rapid fashion. If it wasn't for HIV, people like Alex and Penny Moore and clinical researchers like Linda Gale Becker and others would not have been able to respond to both the basic science, the laboratory and the clinical aspects of this. So working together, also working with the basic scientists as well as clinicians, we're able to really leverage on that relationship and the way we interrogate data so that we can maximize our support of pandemic preparedness. And so the MRC is very committed with the university partners and scientists in South Africa to work with the NDOH and the Department of Science and Innovation to make sure that we are catalytic in the development of this mRNA hub, and that we use this mRNA hub not only to help us with SARS-CoV-2, but also to help us with TB and HIV in the future. We need better vaccines for TB, and we need a vaccine for HIV. And so hopefully this mRNA hub will ensure that not only do we address the immediate problems, that we position ourselves for pandemics, but we don't neglect diseases like HIV and TB in our endeavor to support future work on the continent. So I'm very excited to be part of this, and I'm very proud of the scientists of South Africa and the collaborative fashion. Thank you very much, Daan.
Thank you very much, Dr. Gray, not only for this contribution, but the important work you continue to do. Colleagues, I would again like to encourage you to participate in the discussion. There's a vibrant series of exchanges in the chat box. Also, my thanks to Martin, who's taken the initiative to respond to many of those. We've already spoken earlier. Martin spoke about a very important role Biovac will play. Biovac, proudly South African vaccine manufacturing company, who's had a long and a proud history of contributing to vaccine supply in South Africa, and will play a crucial role as the first spoke for the commercialization of the technology. So I would like to invite the CEO of Biovac, Dr. Morena Makwana, to speak to us. Perhaps, Morena, if you could highlight what this opportunity means for Biovac, but also what are the lessons we are learning. We know this is an initiative which will be replicated elsewhere in the world, and I'm sure there are valuable insights you can share with other companies who will be participating. Dr. Makwana?
Thank you, Daan, and thanks also just to everybody that's been organizing this to get us on this panel. I'd really like to echo, what the other speakers have said, and I think I'd like to just start, before I really talk about, what a spoke is or what a spoke would do. I'd like to firstly start by, the old saying about how do you eat an elephant, and you'll know that the typical response is to say that you need to take one bite at a time, which I think is true. So when you look at a pandemic, or you look at vaccine manufacturing or vaccine development, it's really tackling a big elephant. And but I'd like to add one more statement in terms of saying taking one bite at a time. And I say that you can also tackle it in multiple forms. So you can take a bite at the head, or you can take a bite at the top, in order for one to be able to eat the elephant. So by that, what do I mean? So in tackling vaccine manufacturing capability on the continent, or tackling the likes of pandemic, I mean, so we can start either in the research side and say, okay, this is how we are going to tackle a pandemic or a disease, or we can also start on the manufacturing side. And for me, those are really more complementary. They actually don't compete. So what we've seen, and certainly for us as Biovac, is that we are a manufacturer, and as many of you know, that in terms of pandemic response, we have a partnership with Pfizer, who have a commercialized product that is being distributed multiple doses globally. But we're also part of the hub, which is an important part. So essentially, which also allows us to be able to receive the technology that Afrigen and other partners would have developed, and for us to take it forward. So by that, the consortium is actually very complementary, where you have the upstream side that will do the hardcore science research, take it towards clinical development, and then Biovac, and then the baton will be handed over to a manufacturer like Biovac, as the first spoke, that can then take it forward. And we will utilize the experience, and I'd like to maybe say the scars that we show in terms of developing vaccine manufacturing capability. Vaccine manufacturing capability, and I'm hoping that I'm talking to a lot of people who are converted, is a tough, long game that to some extent can be depressing if you want to be pessimistic. Fortunately, some of us enjoy the pain that actually is there in terms of developing vaccine manufacture, because the public health benefit is really what is our North Star. And so in our experience that we've had with pediatric vaccines in terms of doing full finish, and now we'll be working with Pfizer, all of that experience and years of experience puts us, as a spoke, in a very fertile environment where we can be able to receive the technology that is currently being developed and take it further in terms of taking it into routine good manufacturing practice. So what is the difference between, let's say, what Afrigen will be doing and what Biovac will be doing? So at the moment, a lot of the work is still being done at Afrigen, but by the time it comes to Biovac, we'll need to show the regulator that we can manufacture, well, firstly, that the product can be scaled up, that we can manufacture consistently, that we can interact with the regulator, and also be able to internationalize the product and go through WHO, PQ, and all other regulatory systems. And that is what a spoke would really need to be doing. And I'm only talking from a Biovac perspective, but these are general concepts that as the hub identifies other spoke, this is what we need to be. It would need to be, companies and organizations that would really be able to, take on the baton and really be able to take the product and upscale it and really take it and commercialize it and make use of the technology even beyond the immediate SARS-CoV-2 target. So essentially, that's what Biovac will be. We will be a spoke as the manufacturing commences at Afrigen. What it will also allow us, and again, that's why I'm saying that you tackle an elephant from different angles, and you can have very different bites in terms of doing it. This will also allow us to get into drug substance, and there are many ways of, as I say, manufacturing. So you can get a tech transfer in terms of fill finish. You can also get a tech transfer in terms of a ready-made drug substance. That's another avenue that you can, but also you can go through the route where you get a pipeline from a development. And so there are very many ways of developing capacity that will be long-lasting. And that is essentially the role that Biovac will play. And we hope that we will utilize the experience that we have in terms of commercial manufacture under GMP and working with regulators, working with the markets, working with customers like public stakeholder customers, And we're looking forward to working with the African Union and African CDC and anywhere else where the product will be needed once it's commercial. Thank you, Daan. I will end here.
I think you were introducing Dr. Nicaise Ndembi, who will give us a Pan-African perspective from the African Union Center for Disease Control and Prevention. Of course, when the COVID-19 pandemic started, South Africa had the privilege of leading the African Union. And for our President Ramaphosa, it's consistently been objective that we work to strengthen the Pan-African and the United African response to COVID-19. And this has already been touched upon in the chat box as well. There's been questions from the Southern African Development Community Secretariat, etc. And we deeply value the efforts Dr. Ndembi and the colleagues at the CDC are undertaking. So I would like to invite Dr. Ndembi to the floor. Thank you very much.
No, thank you, Daan. It's really, I'm delighted to be on this call and as well to share our experience and reflection around what's been currently discussed here. So first, we acknowledge the Deputy General of Health, the Deputy Minister, and our distinguished colleagues and partners that have been working tirelessly to ensure that we move really the needle around the continental aspiration to manufacture vaccines on the continent, at least COVID-19 vaccines, if not end-to-end, as we already have a couple of initiatives going on around fill and finish. So I think the first thing I want to start with at continental level is really to commend South Africa. I mean, the South Africa R&D is really, we've heard it over, is really at the cutting edge. And that excellence really in South Africa will really make an international impact. We're starting seeing really African solutions to African problems, but now it's moving to global problems. I think that's quite important. I think Omicron is there to really there to teach us that we have capacity on the continent to move things forward. I think it's quite important. That's the message we should be reading from what's happening now. So again, I re-echo what the previous speakers have said. I think the solution should come here. We have the ingredients. I think if you have the virus, I think you are better positioned to be able to manipulate and get things happen. So I've seen that from the 55,000 feet, each of those feet representing the 55 member states, a strong support at the central level from the government of South Africa, at regional level. We've seen that at continental level and then international level. I think all of us on this call, we have seen His Excellency Cyril Ramaphosa as one of our champions for COVID-19, driving, pushing a continental initiative to be sure that we have things are actually happening. I think I will again echo Martin that yes, we can do it. I think if we just look at my introductory remarks around that, we can actually do it. And again, from South Africa, you all recall it always seems impossible until it's done. You all know who said that. Again, that's from South Africa. That optimism is bringing us to the level where I strongly believe, and again, the previous speaker mentioned that we can only just not crack down the code for the 2 mRNA vaccines that are out there. We can actually re-engineer it to make it much better and even just leave those alone and then move our own initiative and the rest of the world to again come back to us and say, you guys can do it. So I think it's possible to do better than what we currently have. I think that's my strong signal there. But now let's have the perspective, then the prospect around how the political environment, how we can leverage on the AU political environment to be able to drive this initiative. It's quite important. I think I'm seeing a discussion where I would like a little bit, we reflect on this in the long run. The South Africa is the South Africa hub. I think that language, we need to retweak it. It should be a global mRNA hub, because when we do it at the political level, we're bringing a little bit that geolocalization to South Africa. We should expand it. I think beyond the scope of South Africa. I think if we start reading that and reframing it so that the political leaders, if they meet in February, 55 in the room, they don't have the impression that we are promoting a South African initiative. That's very important as we position the political language there. So the success of the mRNA hub in South Africa would be extremely transformational. I think we talked about it, not only for COVID-19, for the current situation we have at hand, but for HIV/AIDS, for TB. Those are the challenges that we have exactly around those diseases, disease priorities of public health relevance. I think Africa CDC, through, I think most of you on this call, from our framework for action, we have actually proposed about 22 disease priorities that we all going to discussing and reviewing and probably reflecting on, so as to ensure that as we move out of COVID-19, we can have enough resources to be able to apply to that and then make use of that platform in terms of viability, sustainability moving forward. So on the political side, what are the instruments? I think we have instruments on the continent. I will start with EMA. We all know what's happened in the past coming days with the African Medicine Agency. We can leverage on that to move a little bit the pointer towards getting emergency use authorization for vaccines produced locally. We have the African Continental Free Trade Area that will address issues around the market shaping, and then which is quite important as we produce vaccines with the economies of scales that we have really, we know exactly where those products are going to land. And then again, instrument within the African Union, the Permanent Representative Council, they are fully supportive, they are fully endorsed the vaccine manufacturing as one of the key priorities, and the Executive Council as well, the Bureau Head of State. In the next coming days, all of us on this call really working collectively, the continental strategy going to be presented to the Executive Council, which is the governing board of the African Union, to know progress made so far. I think, again, we position with WHO, the Medicine Patent Pool, the COVAX, all the COVAX partners, to be sure that mRNA, the mRNA hub in South Africa is on the top of the agenda. I think that's going to be as COVID is. So that discussion should be open. Resources will be allocated, immediately released, following that to be sure we support and this a continental initiative. I think success of the mRNA hub in South Africa is critical in the next steps as we build capacity to ensure that we have a resilient health system and actually secure our health security. I think we put our health security at the center of the agenda. I think it's quite important. So it's quite clear that support for vaccine manufacturing ecosystem on the continent will require several levels of coordination. Already it's happening in South Africa with this meeting. That's going to happen at the African Union. It's happening beyond even the continent with EU and other stakeholders, Team Europe, other partners providing their support to be sure that we're successful. I think we have to keep that momentum going. We know the agenda coordination and setting, you recall the 12th and 13th April summit that led to the launch by His Excellencies Etienne Tshisekedi as the chair of the African Union of the Partnership for Africa Vaccine Manufacturing. Again, the Kigali meeting that happened a couple of days ago, those are actually meetings with really significance because the communique and all the resolutions, propositions are going to be tabled to head of state for endorsement. And then again, those are part of solutions that we'll bring in from the African Union. And then we are really eager at the Africa CDC and African Union to be the Pan-African champion. We have already champions, His Excellency Ramaphosa, champions, His Excellency Paul Kagame, and other champions that are actually coming to support this from the regulatory perspective, the COVID-19 response from the COVID-19 Commission, again, piloted by His Excellency Ramaphosa. So I'm bringing those up to be sure that you already have a strong backing from the political leadership on the continent. We're also actively championing existing continental-wide initiatives that I mentioned to you to be sure that we fully support the mRNA hub in South Africa to be actually reflective of a continental initiative or also aspiration to meet at least produce 60% of our vaccine by 2040. So again, thank you for inviting Africa CDC to support this. We're very excited that this work moving forward will be able to crystallize our own generation and ensure that we're being responsive to the current situation, and we provided solutions rather than just being really observing to the rest of the world to provide solutions to us as usual. So I'm looking forward to discussing and co-creating the pathway of shaping the political landscape to ensure that we're successful in this currently difficult and tough environment. Thank you, and back to you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you very much, Dr. Ndembi, and thank you for really providing us with the most informative and fascinating insight into policy and strategy development at a Pan-African level, and also really highlighting that this Pan-African response is making a global contribution to addressing a global challenge. I would again like to everyone to keep engaged with the conversation. My thanks to Charles and Martin, who are actively involved responding to the various questions. I would now like to go to my colleague, Dr. Mmboneni Muofhe, who's the Deputy Director for Technology and Innovation at the Department of Science and Innovation, and who's playing a senior leadership role in this initiative as representative of the South African government. We had earlier heard from our Deputy Minister and the Director General of National Department of Health, but I'm going to ask Mmboneni just to reflect a bit more on the South African government's involvement and commitment to this partnership. Mmboneni?
Thank you very much, Program Director, and I just want to also thank the contributions that have already been made by the different colleagues. I think what is important here is to really appreciate that this particular establishment of the mRNA Tech Transfer Hub is happening at a time where everything seems to be ripe for it to happen. And I really want to take on the previous presentation by Dr. Ndembi, that the continent is ready. We have heard through the presentation by Dr. Martin Friede that the global community is also ready to support this. And what is more crucial really is how the local community has positioned itself, because ultimately for this to happen, it needs to find itself in an enabling ecosystem. And those presentations that were made by colleagues such as Professor Petro Terblanche, Professor Glenda Gray, and also Dr. Murena Makwana, and it just shows you that there is an ecosystem that is ready to carry this forward. And that is really where, when you've got a government policy and strategy that supports this, it just gives it that lift. And this is really where I can now start to talk about the role of the Department of Science and Innovation. And the establishment of the hub actually comes on the back of our bioeconomy strategy, which was launched in 2013. And very much central to it, in particular on the area of health. There were four things that I want to mention. One was that we needed to focus on the development of new medical devices. And two, looking at new or improved diagnostics. And three, the development of vaccines and other biologicals. And lastly, the new or improved therapeutic drugs that are relevant for our continent. So when we started working on the issue of building on the capability as a department for local vaccine manufacturing, and the role that we play, for example, in partnership with Biovac, which Dr. Murena Makwana had so eloquently spoken about, one of the things that was clear was that there needed to be a process on the basis of which we start building towards manufacturing vaccines locally. And of course, you know, one of the things that have been highlighted is how complex it is to manufacture vaccines. And hence we had to choose the pathway that will actually enable us to move and arrive at the destination. And while we have started moving in that direction, it's, for example, through various partnerships that were held on technology transfer between Biovac and a whole range of companies, the likes of Sanofi, the likes of Pfizer, what we started doing was to say, how do we do the backward integration towards actual local vaccine development? And at this point, we've got a number of fill and finish tech transfer that have gone on successfully. And the next step was to begin to say, again, let's take step until we really reach a point where we can start from the scratch, from R&D, to develop our own vaccines locally. Now, the department had to invest a lot on the establishment of relevant research infrastructure. We had to invest a lot in the building of capabilities of our own researchers. And I must really say that over the years, South Africa has really had a whole range of very good scientists, some of which, of course, are in the platform here, and the bulk of them are not here. However, what is more important is that we also, through the role that the Department of Science and Innovation play, need to continue to build much more capability. And this is really where we can begin to see some of the new researchers that are coming up in the system. And they are, in one way or another, beneficiaries of various research grants that the department provides, and also directed allocations that are aimed at this particular mRNA tech transfer hub. Now, what I also need to indicate is that already in the process of starting the process that Professor Petro Terblanche highlighted around getting ourselves ready to transfer this technology to the whole world, those that are willing, those that are going to put on their applications to come and be trained here, that the number of professionals that are working currently in those areas will definitely need to be increased. And that's why we're looking at how best do we strengthen the partnerships with universities, which I must say our local universities have come in a great way. And this is why one of the things that we're doing is not simply to look at copying the vaccines as they are produced everywhere, but to look at how can we actually, using this particular platform, which is the mRNA technology transfer platform, to develop vaccines that will probably be very much relevant to our own environment. Firstly, by way of how we need to deal with issues logistically. So there's a whole range of R&D work that needs to go into that. For example, it will be great if we can really have a vaccine that can actually be a little bit more tolerant than one requiring, say, minus 70 degrees Celsius of storage. That's one thing. The other thing is obviously that this platform then becomes one that we master in developing vaccines that are relevant to our own environment, mention being made, for example, of tuberculosis, looking at developing HIV vaccines. We also need to really look into ensuring that we can develop locally the flu vaccines and so on and so forth. And this can only happen when we continue as the Department of Science and Innovation to support financially and otherwise the work that is happening in all our entities that are conducting R&D, but also those that are starting to take us into an area of demonstration, clinical trialing. We do have that capacity, but we need to continue to strengthen it. And the one critical aspect that we're looking at as a department and as government is that, as we have seen with the issue of both in terms of diagnostics and testing, that it's very easy to be forgotten unless you are able to stand up on your own. And this is really where we very much jump into this opportunity to nurture and build the mRNA tech transfer hub, because it then begins to say, build capability so that as we continue to manage this pandemic and prepare ourselves for future pandemics, then we actually aren't going to be, in the next 5 years, saying the same thing, that the whole world has forgotten about us, because we will be part of that whole world. And this is really what this tech transfer hub starts to give us. So we are really looking forward, and we are continuing to put an investment. And that's why we keep making sure that even from our R&D side of things, that our scientists, especially those that have been on the forefront of supporting government's role in responding to the pandemic, that we provide funding allocations. And I'm pleased to say that last financial year alone, we actually had to redirect a lot of funding towards COVID-19 response, both in terms of diagnostics, in terms of issues around the vaccine manufacturing and development. That is why there has been a whole lot of announcement also of partnerships that are being formed with the African government, but also with the leadership that is being provided even at continental level, that we're beginning to see this continent marching with a unified vision of saying we are going to stand up and make sure that we actually have capability to respond to the pandemic in future. So I'm going to stop it at that, and then we'll handle whatever it comes through in terms of questions, etc. But thank you very much, Program Director, for the opportunity.
Thank you very much, Mmboneni, for very detailed, very rich insight, not only into the policy perspective, but also the policy implementation for the South African government. Of course, crucial partners for this initiative is the World Health Organization and the Medicines Patent Pool. And that perhaps comes as no surprise that their representatives, Martin Friede and Charles Gore, have been very active in the chat box, responding to the various questions. So to conclude our panel discussion, I'm going to invite them for some remarks, reflecting on the discussion thus far and their organization's perspective on the further elaboration of this partnership. So I'm going to start with you, Martin. You've already spoken to many of the topical issues raised in the chat. Perhaps you could also say something about community and stakeholder civil society involvement. This was raised.
Okay, so we need to get everybody together. So one of the questions was, what is WHO actually bringing to this? And I'm going to begin with the simple word of convening. This is really all WHO can do. We are essentially an organization that convenes. Now, convening, some people say, well, that's coordination. And of course, it would be excellent if we coordinated. Everybody wants us to coordinate everybody else, but nobody wants to be coordinated themselves. And that's the challenge. So to make reference, Marina talked about how do you eat an elephant? My analogy is, how do you herd cats? And again, it's going to be one at a time, and generally by putting some food on the ground, or in this case, some funds. So our role here is to bring everybody together. This is a transparent process. This is there for the world. It's not there for a single organization. And to repeat what Nicaise said, although the hub is in South Africa, this is not a South African hub. This is a global hub. It is there to help all the low and middle income countries on earth. It is in South Africa because that was the best proposal with the best infrastructure, the best academic support, and within low and middle income countries. So what are we doing here, and how do we bring everybody together? It is essential that we have civil society with us, but also that we have industry with us. It is essential that we have really all the players. Now, the decision-making process for the hub, as I've pointed out, is being made by the African CDC, the South African Department of Science and Innovation, Medicines Patent Pool, and an external advisor. And their recommendation comes to WHO. The final decision is with WHO. So just a few thoughts for me to, before I hand it over to Charles. I'm going to come back to yes, we can, and reiterate something that has been said. This is the right moment. Africa has been on the receiving end of technology for a long time. It is time that Africa, which has we've got the people, we've got the brains, we've got the universities. It really is time that we create the environment, the infrastructure for the scientists in Africa to be able to address the African problems first, and come up with the solutions, and then going beyond the African problems to the global problems. I am 100% certain that we can do this. I know Africa very well. I've lived much of my life in Africa, although I live now in Switzerland. I have absolute confidence that we are going to manage this. Daan, back to you.
Thank you very, very much, Martin, also for that optimistic, committed note to end that intervention. I'm now going to go to Charles Gore from the Medicines Patent Pool, who's been very active in the chat, responding to various issues related to intellectual property and resource mobilization. So I'm sure there's quite a bit you would like to share, Charles. Charles, over to you.
Dan, thank you very much indeed, and thank you very much to DSI and the Department of Health for organizing this. Particularly DSI, and maybe I'll just start with a little bit on the fundraising side, just to echo what Martin has said about, yes, this can be done. And what's been extremely encouraging to see is the number of donor countries who are right behind this. We have a whole list of them who have expressed interest. Some of them have already committed funds. Some of them we're in the middle of negotiating agreements with, and some of them are just waiting to see where the gaps are to come forward to fill them. So that's important from a financial point of view, but it's also extremely important from the point of view of political support. So what we are seeing is across the board support for this. In terms of where we are with the funding, as Martin pointed out, you know, we've got certainly the money we need for the next 18 months or so, and I have no doubt that we will close the gap. But anyone on this call who's interested in being part of the funding of this, please do contact me. I put my email in the chat because WHO asked us to just do the coordinating on this. And I'd like to say, actually, from that perspective, for me, this is an African initiative, and the Medicines Patent Pool is extremely pleased to be able to be part of a facilitation of it through supporting WHO's work in this. And when it comes to intellectual property, and the reason that WHO asked for our support in this is that clearly licensing will be an important part of this. And even though neither of the two mRNA vaccine manufacturers currently producing vaccines have come forward to offer their technology, nonetheless, mRNA is a very fast evolving field. And new discoveries are happening all the time, some of which may be extremely important for low and middle income countries in terms of cost of goods or in terms of thermostability. And we may need to license some of that in. We're hoping to avoid that because what's really important to us is that we have as much freedom to operate as possible. And clearly there may be terms in any licenses that may be restrictive. That's in terms of in-licensing. In terms of out-licensing, the idea is that any discoveries that happen with the hub or the spokes will then be licensed back so it can be shared amongst the entire project for the benefit primarily of low and middle income countries. So I think that's really important to understand this idea that we are going to be sharing technology, and the technology produced from this is to be used for the benefit of public health in low and middle income countries. I'm going to stop there in the interest of time because, you know, what is really important is that the people on this call get the opportunity to ask questions, and I've done, and Martin has too, our best to answer some of the questions in the chat. But doubtless there are others. So I'll hand back to you, Daan. You're muted, Daan.
Thank you very much, Charles, not only for that intervention, but the tremendous support and the critical role the patent pool is playing as part of this initiative. We're now going to come to the discussion. Well, the discussion has already started, but I'm going to invite questions from the floor. And you can use the well-established methodology of raising your digital hand and then we will give you the opportunity. You can put on your camera and unmute yourself to ask a question. Please keep it brief, because we are going to aim to finish on time. Many of our panelists have other commitments. I'm going to start with Kate from Médecins Sans Frontières, who's been very patient. She's had her hand up right at the start. So Kate, I can give you the floor, and if you could please direct, if your question is directed at a specific panel member, that would be helpful as well. Kate?
Thanks, Daan. I'm not video because I'm here in Cape Town and connection's not so good. So just with reference to what you said in your first presentation, Martin, when you said off the cuff that you know, that IP would not be an issue here, and that you were not looking at that. I'm just a little confused, considering that the stakeholders involved are the South African government. So we've had the Office of the Presidency and Ramaphosa himself get behind the TRIPS, the African Union come behind the TRIPS waiver. There have been lots of discussions about how we look at intellectual property and what that might mean, and for technology transfer in particular. We've also recently heard, and we look for a bit of clarity on what's happened with Moderna filing a patent here and what that, because we have a lack of examination of that patent. And it's not an issue that we can just put aside. It's something that we need to discuss. And it would be good as well to have the Department of Trade and Industry represented in the stakeholder discussions we have. And I hope you'd agree with that. But perhaps, you know, you could just do a specific question about why we're going to respect patents and why that was presented as a fait accompli. Thank you.
Okay, so thanks very much, Kate. So first of all, the technology that the hub is currently following is using a technology for which the owner has issued a worldwide waiver, essentially a covenant of non-enforcement, for the duration of the pandemic. So there is already a waiver in place. That is why IP during the pandemic is not an issue. So this then comes to the question, well, what about the IP after the pandemic? So the IP after the pandemic is of course an issue. But that would also be an issue if there was a waiver, because the waiver would also only be valid during the pandemic. And this is why the hub has been asked to proceed with a known technology for which there is a waiver, and then in parallel to be either developing internally or licensing in other technologies that would provide the hub and all of the technology recipients in low and middle income countries a freedom to operate for an improved technology. So by improved technology, we mean technologies that are either cheaper to produce because the current vaccines are expensive to produce, using less mRNA, for example, or a cheaper lipid, or more thermostable because the current vaccines require an ultra-cold chain, and that is a challenge in low and middle income countries. And also provides freedom to operate so that we can produce TB, malaria, HIV, and other dengue, chikungunya, and other vaccines of importance for Africa and other low and middle income country regions without having to be worried about the big companies. So this is why I say for the moment, IP is not an issue, but we have with us Charles Gore, who leads Medicine's patent pool, the second word in that name, patent. And maybe Charles could provide a more, another addition to this. Charles, over to you.
No, I don't think I've got anything really particularly to add to what you said, Martin. Absolutely.
Thank you very much, both Martin and Charles, for quite a comprehensive answer. And of course, Kate, this is a discussion which will be ongoing. What I can tell you is that the South African Department of Trade and Industry and Competition is fully part of the coordinated South African government's involvement in this initiative. I see Brooke Baker, if I could invite you, please. I saw you were very active in the chat, so an opportunity to you.
Yes, thank you very much. This is a follow-up question on intellectual property, but also a clarification on regulatory issues as well. So I think we've heard a fair amount of trying to deal with the potential blockage of Moderna intellectual property and trying to kind of recreate the know-how and work with existing non-enforcement. But it's also likely to be true that the hub itself is going to be developing some forms of intellectual property, potentially, or at least some forms of confidential know-how, or what might be considered trade secret know-how. And I haven't heard yet how that's going to be handled, whether there are intentions, what are the intentions with respect to the establishment of those rights? Are those rights going to be in license to the medicine patent pool as part of the arrangement? Are there going to be more efforts to have kind of open access to that proprietary, what might otherwise be proprietary intellectual property rights of the hub itself and or some of its spokes? And then the second question is just to clarify for people, for all of us on the call, that if this independent, let's call it an independent vaccine, is developed by the hub successfully, just to clarify, there will need to be clinical trials. We'll have to have a separate regulatory process. But as I understand it, the hubs will be working under essentially the regulatory dossier of the spokes will be working under the regulatory dossier of the hub. If you could just explain a little bit more about the regulatory processes.
Thanks, Martin. You're muted, Martin.
Sorry, Brooke, I thought you were beginning to ask the question to Charles about licensing and intellectual property.
I'll answer that one.
Okay,
I'll answer that one. You answer the bit about the regulatory. How's that?
Okay, Charles, please answer the IP part first while I think about the regulatory part.
Okay. Okay, Brooke, yes, no, the intention is that this should be available back through the medicines patent pool so that we can then out-license it again, so that this is not supposed to be exclusive. So what is developed by the hub or the spokes within this project should be licensed back to us for us to license out to anyone else. And that includes the know-how as well as the licenses on this. This is meant to be very much a sharing project. Having said which, of course, as you know, the devil is always in the detail, and when we get down to actually discussing the agreements, but that is the ethos behind it, and that is what we are trying to achieve. I have to say, we've not yet got to the point of the actual detail of this, partly because, as we continue to say, we are doing this at breakneck speed, so we are building the plane as we fly it, and we're trying to put in place many, many different processes to make sure that the whole thing works at the same time. So this is really only a few months old, this project. And so there's a huge amount still to be worked out. Thanks. Did that give you enough time, Martin? Or do you want me to bore on a bit more?
No, actually, that's fine. I'm going to ask Brooke. Brooke, can you repeat the question? I'm sorry.
So it's because this will be essentially a new product in terms of regulatory authorities and need to go through some degree of clinical trial, I suspect. And that's fine, though it will delay things. I'd like to hear a little bit more about the planning for the clinical trials, but also, if I understand this hub and spoke mechanism, the spokes are going to be able to essentially rely on the regulatory dossier that's ultimately filed by the hub. So there at least be some acceleration of regulatory processes. But I just think to clarify for folks on the call.
Okay, so thanks, really good question. So yes, this is a new product. It will have to go through phase 1, phase 2, phase 3. We still do not know what that phase 3 trial is going to look like, because we don't know what COVID is going to look like next week, quite honestly. So by the time we get to phase 3, which is in about 2 years' time, what is this going to be? Is this going to be an immunogenicity bridging study? It's highly unlikely that we're going to have enough of a naive population to be able to do efficacy studies. At least I hope we don't have such a big naive population. So we don't know what that phase 3 study is going to be. However, what is certain is that the recipients will be able to rely on that clinical data. They will receive that clinical data as part of the tech transfer package. It will accelerate their clinical development, but it will not remove completely their requirement to do some clinical work, at least to demonstrate. There'll be some bridging studies probably. But that is to be determined by each regulatory agency as we work on the tech transfer. Over.
Thank you very much, Martin and Charles, and also Brooke for those important questions. I'm going to go to Professor Richard Gordon of the Medical Research Council. Richard, I don't know if you have a question, perhaps you have an answer.
Yeah, I was going to add on to what Martin was saying, and for Brooke. You know, most of the vaccines in South Africa, the MRC has been involved in extensively in the vaccine trials, and before that have been involved heavily in HIV clinical trials. So I don't think the regulatory and the clinical should be in any way seen as an obstacle. I think it should be the opposite. And you know, Professor Gray, who's on the call here, to see how quickly the Sisonke J&J trial got through approval and regulatory, and how quickly things are moving, I think there's quite an argument that things could probably move quicker if done here as well. So I don't see the clinical and regulatory being a hurdle at all. I actually see things working quite well in the vaccine space at the moment. But Glenda, you're welcome to correct that, but I think that's the way it's currently at the moment.
Yeah, I think that we're very happy with, we have excellent collaboration with SAHPRA and our ethics committees. And the SAHPRA and our ethics committees have worked 24/7 and even on weekends to assist us in the rapid review and approval of COVID vaccine trials. So we remain indebted to their responsiveness and their collegiality and their willingness to work at 10 o'clock at night, even if they have to see us. Thanks.
Thanks, Professor Gray. Charles, your hand was flickering up, but it disappeared. I don't know if you wanted to add something.
Oh, well, thank you. I was actually just going to type it into the chat. It was just to clarify a question from Wim about civil society participation in this. Just to sort of reiterate what Martin was saying, the steering committee for this is an advisory committee to WHO. WHO is setting up a mechanism for civil society to feed into it, because it is the decision maker. So the steering committee is not actually a decision-making body. So I think I saw Wim's response saying that's a bit disappointing. And I think perhaps it was because it wasn't really clear that that's not taking the decisions. WHO is taking the decisions, and in parallel, they are setting up a mechanism for civil society's involvement. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Charles. That's, I think, a very, very helpful clarification from the governance perspective. Colleagues, we're coming towards the end of the session. I want to give an early heads up, a warning to all our panelists that I'm going to ask them just for a 20-second soundbite when we conclude on key messages they want to leave the participants with. I see this is a final and last call for anyone who wants to take the floor. We've noted a rich discussion, notably on the intellectual property in the chat box, and that old cliche being used, the devil is in the detail. Yeah, definitely. There are a lot of devils to deal with, but I think there's a commitment here and the expertise from everyone concerned to address them. I do not see any digital hands being raised, anyone asking for the floor. So we have a few minutes left. So before I wrap up, as I said, I will just quickly go to our panelists and asking them for any final remarks, any messages, anything which struck you in the discussion. Kate, you had asked, or you had called for more discussions of this kind, and yeah, we can definitely assure you this is just a first. It's not a once-off event. it's part of an ongoing process, and we have certainly learned quite a few lessons. So I'm going to start with Petro. You were first up. Any parting words from you?
Yes, just thank you. I think very rich discussion. I think the IP discussion needs more discussions. I've noted some in the chat box issues around South African intellectual property, NIPMO and IPR Act. We're already engaging with NIPMO, very aware of some of the challenges there. But we're also very open to in-licensing IP from our own universities. I know that some of the universities has some richness. So this is an inclusive partnership, wonderful working with everybody. We keep going and we will deliver.
Thank you, Petro. Alex?
I think from where I'm sitting, I think we have a dream team of South African researchers. You know, they're coming from all places of society. For example, Sandile has led a lot of this work. And, you know, he's from KwaZulu-Natal, and he's helping places like Canada prepare for the Omicron wave. So I think, you know, things are somewhat reversed now, and we are leading the rest of the world. I mean, this was true before for diseases like HIV and TB, and for clinical studies such as the one run by Glenda Gray, and it's a real privilege working with her. But I think as far as the trialists, clinicians, and South African scientists, I think we can deliver.
Thanks, Alex. Well, you mentioned Professor Grace. I'm going to go to her.
Yeah, I think we're poised. You know, I think Africa, the African continent, and the scientists in Africa are poised to lead this, and I'm very excited to be part of this endeavor and to work with our continent to support this mRNA hub and the progression in the continent. So looking forward to this continental-wide endeavor.
Probably whilst Daan is waiting, Daan, I guess I'll go ahead. I'm the next one. I think for me, I think what is important is that we often read about successes and we often make reference to other areas where there's successes, but forgetting that those successes took time to build. And our, you know, the well-known hubs in terms of biotechnology, we obviously know the US, the East Coast, we know the West Coast in terms of them being rich in biotechnology and manufacture. We know countries like Belgium, Netherlands, which are big manufacturing hubs. UK is also quite involved in terms of R&D. We also have the likes of South Korea, who are also very big in biotechnology, and also India. But I think what we should not forget is that that took time and it took coordination. We have an opportunity with WHO and others to really create so that future generations can look back and say, a hub was created on the continent, and much like there are others in the world. Thank you.
Thanks, Morena, and thanks for stepping in when I disappeared. Mmboneni?
Thank you.
I got a question.
From our side, what is quite crucial is the acknowledgement that we have been working on the strategy for the development of local vaccine capability for a long time, and some of the people that we're working on, including Morena and all our scientists, I don't think we have ever had such an injection of confidence and support in that endeavor than we have now. And it just feels to me that, yes, as I've indicated in my interventions, the time is just ripe for us to do that. And I'm really excited that we are going to start to move into realizing the vision that we've always had. So I want to thank everybody for this.
How do you predict the future? How do you plan for a world that doesn't exist yet? In a world with 7 billion people and hundreds of billion different variables, how do we guess what will happen next? We ask questions, questions that no one can answer yet. How do we feed a growing population sustainably? How are industries changing? What does it mean for jobs? How will jobs change as automation grows? How do we get the information we need to make the right decisions? What is the next pandemic? We ask, then work to find answers. At the Department of Science and Innovation, we partner with industry and other government stakeholders to find answers to some of our country's biggest questions. Not just to secure our future, but the future of partners, industry, and South Africans. We initiate, encourage, and support homegrown innovation that answers the impossible questions. In an uncertain world, where the answers change all the time, we start by asking the right questions. The Department of Science and Innovation, making sure it's possible.